Okay, so ready, opponent?
Yes.
Okay, ready, Judge?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you everyone for being here. My name is Affirmative, and I'm on the topic corporations owe more to their consumers than their shareholders. So today, I'd like to start by defining some terms, such as corporations, which are an organization which exists independently of its members. That's from the legal dictionary. And consumer is a person who buys goods or services for use, for own use. That's from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And the meaning of owe is a moral obligation. A shareholder is one that holds or owns a share or part in a property or company. And my weighing mechanism is net benefits. Net benefits, yes. So first, I'll just start with my first contention, which is without consumer, no corporation. Judge, my first contention, without consumer, no corporation, brings to mind the question, why do people start businesses? Do we start businesses because we want others to invest in the businesses? Or we start businesses because we want to solve problems for individuals? I'm sure when we see Amazon, Apple, Facebook, or Twitter, or now X, what we think is that they are solving a problem for people. They exist to solve problems for people, not for investment from foreign bodies, organizations, or individuals. The sole aim of a business is to solve a problem for an individual. So if a business is not solving a problem for an individual, will the individual go back to that business? Definitely not. If I'm to buy this timer here, and this timer is not working as effective as it should, why would I buy it? Of course not. I won't buy it, and I'll tell my friends not to buy it because it's not serving its duty. Businesses are built for what? For the consumer. That's my first subpoint. Why businesses are built? Businesses are built for what? The benefit of the consumer, not the shareholder. My subpoint B is why shareholders invest or become shareholders. They invest because the product is working, because the consumer is buying the product. No proper shareholder, Judge, I believe you're writing, so write this down. No wise shareholder will invest in a business not fulfilling its purpose, or a business not attending to the demands of the consumer. People won't invest in Apple, Facebook, or all these big companies if they know these businesses are failing. If a business has a 20-year track record of failing, I don't think Berkshire Hathaway or Bill Gates will say, no, let me take some money and invest in this company. You have a track record of failing, consumers are not buying product. Should be looking for more shareholders or focus on the product. The wise thing to do is what? Focus on the product. Let the consumer buy the product, then attract shareholders. This brings me to my second contention of shareholders have too much power. Shareholders are like vultures. They wait, looking around for a company that's doing well. A great example is Shark Tank. You realize Shark Tank doesn't go about looking for businesses. They wait for business to be successful before they invest in them. So if you appear on Shark Tank, you're like, oh, I have this KPI, I'm making this business. Like, how much profit am I making? Are you making? You're like, oh, so actually I've made a loss of $10 million. No Shark Tank investor will invest in you. They'll be like, no, I don't want a part of this. Why? Because the consumers are not buying product. Not because you are not handsome, because the consumers are not buying product. So the focus should be on the consumers. So corporations owe more to their consumers. Before Apple became Apple, when the first iPhone was released, people saw like, wow, this is a good product. They tested it was fine, they told their friends. If it was a shitty product, excuse me to say, no one would tell their friend, like, go and invest your money to this phone, because they know they may lose that friendship over a stranger's new device. No one will do that. Shareholders are like voters, as I said, they pick and clean what they want. They have no brand loyalty. If a company is failing to their shareholder can say, I'm selling all my shares today. They're done with you. But for a consumer, if a product, let's say this product fails, the maker of this product can come to me, convince me, say, I'm going to take this product back from you, make it again, and give a new one, try it again. Let's have this relationship. Let's have this loyalty between us so that what? You can continue to use my product. A shareholder can decide, I got my money, I ain't going to listen to anyone, the end. What are you going to do? Nothing. This brings my third contention of direct comparison. That corporations owe what? The consumers their loyalty. You are buying an iPhone because you know the iPhone is going to be of great quality. It's not a cheap product. It's going to be of great quality. Now take note that my first contention was from the harvardbusinessreview.com, that's the source, and my second contention was also from the Harvard Business Review. With this, I believe the round should be voted in favor of the F. Cross X.
All right. I got 2 minutes on the clock. Is my judge ready? My opponent?
Yeah.
All right, and we will begin now. That was a great speech, but first I do have some questions. What makes shareholders happy?
What makes shareholders happy is consumers buying a product.
Okay, all right, and then why do corporations exist?
Because consumers are buying the product.
Right, so it's for profit, right? We can both agree with that.
Not necessarily.
No?
It's to meet a demand, because you can have a business not necessarily make profit and not make it substantial, like Amazon did in its first 15 years, and now look at what Amazon is. In the first 15 years, they were not making substantial profit. In fact, from Jeff Bezos, he said they were making substantial minimal losses, but people were coming for their product.
Right, it's an investment. That's right. It's an investment. You invest, you go under a little bit, and then it goes skyrockets, like Amazon is now, one of the biggest.
Yeah, because people bought the product, not because others invested in it.
Right. So I just kind of wanted to get a confirmation of why are corporations actually existing, and I think we can both agree it's for profit.
Not necessarily. It's to meet the demands of the people.
Okay, all right. And then I do want to talk about some of your framework here. You talked about moral obligation.
Yes.
Why do you think that it's a moral obligation? Can we not just talk about, like, corporations, they're written on paper, they're made by man. Yeah. Why are we talking about moral obligations here? Can we consider something else, something different?
Yes, because the existence of the corporation is based on the loyalty of an individual who tested your first product, your second, third, and over the years has been consistent with you. So you have that moral obligation to ensure that relationship stands, and sorry to say, not give a shitty product to that individual, because then you won't be having a moral obligation with somebody who's been in coach your friend for all these years.
Okay, I just want to explain. So does that mean Microsoft has a moral obligation to make me happy? Is that what you're saying?
They have a moral obligation to give you the best product possible.
For what? Why? Why would that be?
To meet your needs, which eventually make you happy. But the foundation is
your needs. It's not morality though. That's just profit. That's just profit. Right?
No, because Microsoft doesn't necessarily need to make profit on a product.
All right. I just want to confirm. I got 5 seconds. I just want to confirm. Does that mean like New Balance has a moral obligation to make the best shoes? Is that what you're saying?
It has an obligation to make great shoes.
Thank you. I got 6 minutes on the clock. Is my judge ready?
Ready.
My opponent? All right, we'll begin now. Why do corporations exist? I think this is a question that's going to be bobbing around this whole entire round, but Judge, I think I have some very convincing reasons on why you can negate today's resolution, on how we can clearly see that shareholders, you can have a company without consumers, which I will get to that a little later, a corporation specifically, without consumers, but you cannot have a corporation without shareholders. So let's get into those reasons, but before I get that, I want to thank my judge for being here. I really do appreciate your time. I know you have a lot of rounds to judge today, so thank you so much for taking time out of your day and doing this and letting us have some fun. So thank you so much, and thank you for my opponent. This is going to be a great debate, and thank you for a wonderful first speech. I really do appreciate it. So all I'm going to do in this round is I'm going to go over my contentions, and then I'm going to attack my opponent's case. So I do want to go into some observations, though. I think they're very important. The first is going to be on my opponent's framework about the morality of everything. If you're going in my opponent's framework, that means that New Balance, Microsoft, Apple, all of them, every single company ever, including nonprofits, have a moral obligation to make the best product for me. And Judge, what I can tell you is that they have an incentive to do what? To make profit. Why? Not to make me happy. I know a whole bunch of corporations that don't make people happy. And I can tell you that for a fact. They are in it for the money. If you're talking about humanitarian aid or some other nonprofit, we can discuss that there. But we are talking about corporations as a whole. And corporations as a whole need money to run. I just want to make that observation first. My second observation is going to be some corporations don't have consumers. This is according to Brex. They had like 6 or 7 different types. You have S corporations, C corporation, you have LLCs, nonprofit organizations. These are things about storing wealth, doing finances, and nonprofit, obviously, not about consumers. So what we can see clearly is that there are some instances that corporations don't even have to please consumers. So that's already a reason that you can vote against the notion. The second is that in order to win this round, the AF has to prove that a corporation exists, more likely than not, for the interests of consumers. And what I can say clearly is that there are corporations, like I said in my first observation, that do not exist for consumers at all. They exist for what? For any other reason, an LLC, a C corporation, S corporation. These are for wealth. There's not even any consumer in this at all. So this is very, very important. And then my third is going to be definitionally. This is according to Corporate Finance Institute. They say that a corporation is a legal entity created by individuals. This is important. Created by individuals, stockholders, and shareholders. All right, this is very important. I'll have two things to point out that, but I want to finish this. Shareholders with the purpose of operating for profit. Okay, that's the definition of a corporation. And Judge, what I can tell you, there's two things. One, it's created by stockholders, individuals, and shareholders. That does not mean I have a moral obligation to please everybody around me. I don't. I do not have that, because this corporation isn't made by like a higher power to have moral obligation. No, this is made by man on paper. And when that corporation has no more money, it's done. Rip it up. It's gone. So ultimately, who do you have an obligation to? You have an obligation to the shareholders, and solely the shareholders. Those are the people that started it. Those are the people that are funding it. And in a structure of man, in its own entity, it is going to be an obligation to the shareholders. And second, is going to be operating for profit. Again, this might get confusing because there are nonprofits, but ultimately they have to have money to continue their cause. So again, money has to be involved, and there are shareholders. You need shareholders to have a corporation. You don't have to have consumers to have a corporation. So fourth, again, my opponent has to prove all the time, because I didn't know if he said more often than not with weighing mechanism. He said net benefit. So he has to prove that corporations owe more to their consumers than their shareholders all the time, which is a huge burden. And fifth is going to be not a moral statement. It's a fact statement. This is a fact statement. Please do not misconstrue the moral framework. Let's get into those quick contentions, and then I'm going to attack my opponents. First is going to be, what is a corporation? Again, I've explained this in my observations. I'm not going to rehash it again. But the purpose is to satisfy the shareholders. They exist because of the shareholders made by them. They made this corporation entirely. Bill Gates made Microsoft for what? Not some humanitarian aid. They didn't do that. He did this for profit, simply. That's it. He did it. And same thing with Steve Jobs and all these other people. They've made this product because they know consumers will buy it and they get a profit, period, done. And that's capitalism. I don't have to rehash that over and over again. There's no moral framework in that. And the second is going to be, my second contention is going to be that it is to the shareholder, that the entity is to the shareholders. Entirely, you can have the shareholders in this, and ultimately they have all the skin in the game. They're working, they're doing the stuff behind the scenes. The consumer goes to the store and buys some Oreos and leaves. That's what they do. But everybody at Oreo, the CEO of Oreo, whatever that guy is, he's working behind the scenes to get everything done, and he has to satisfy the shareholders, because ultimately what the shareholders can do, they can just sell, and then Oreo is no more. I can just choose not to buy Oreo, and they can still go on and do their thing. But if shareholders share their stock, it's over. It's done. Like my opponent's example, if Shark Tank, if the main guy just pulled all of his money, then that organization's over. It's done. So we need to satisfy the shareholders. And the third is going to be, there's two models. The first is going to be shareholder primacy, which means that the shareholders are more valued than that of the consumer. And the second is going to be contrasting, a model, which is, this is according to Forbes, saying that they are all equal. So these are two models of business right here, according to Forbes. And both of them do not affirm the resolution. One values one more than the other, which is the shareholders over the consumer. And the second, which is a more conservative kind of point of view, says that they are equal. So in no situation is the affirmation right in those two models. And now let's get to my opponents. I know this will be very quick, but let's just go right into this. The first contention is going to be, without consumer, there's no corporation. I've already told you this, that you can have corporations such as nonprofits and LLCs. And then subpoint A and subpoint B, he set forth the consumer, and why become shareholders. Again, they do it for profit, period, done, next. That's all it is. They aren't doing it for some moral reason or things like that. They're doing it for profit. That's why they're making it. The second is, shareholders are vultures. Again, I agree, but not in all cases. Sometimes they get early businesses. In direct competition comparison, we can see that they are in it for the money, and that's it.
Oh, God damn. So, Judge, Cossex, opening ready?
Yes.
Ready? Okay. So that's a wonderful speech, my dear opponent. So, I have a couple of questions. So, my first question is, you said that some corporations don't have consumers, right?
Yes.
And can you give some examples? You said LLCs and what else?
Yes, so we have, this is according to Brecht, so this isn't just something I'm pulling out. It's called S corporations, these are things about finance and things like that. C corporations is talking about wealth accumulation, things of that nature. Nonprofit organizations, like the public broadcast system.
Okay, so with the wealth corporation, wealth building corporations, somebody has to bring their wealth to you, right?
Right, so I can make an
Yeah,
LLC
right.
and like send it off to like Switzerland. It doesn't need a consumer, I can just make that.
Okay, okay, great. But you agreed to my definition of a consumer, didn't you? Because my definition of a consumer was a person who buys or who attends to goods or services, not necessarily goods only, but services. Because with wealth building, there's no good. There's what service, maybe healthcare. It's a service.
Right. And
you agree with it, right?
I can agree with that, but I can. But I think you also need to say the definition of corporation. I think that's what we're really talking about. Corporations can be S corporations, C corporations, LLCs, things of that nature that don't have consumers.
You also mentioned about Bill Gates building his company for the focus of what? Investment, for the focus of profit. But for his product, for his company to succeed, the consumer had to purchase it, right?
Right, and then the shareholders
wait. But the foundation, the consumer had to purchase it before
that's
the
not the
shareholders
foundation. The foundation is that there has to be stockholders to invest money initially, and
Okay,
then
so-
they build, and then consumers build. You have to keep stockholders.
So what you're saying is, if I'm to start a computer making company today, whether my product works or not, I need shareholders for that company to succeed.
Unless you have millions of dollars to make the product you're talking about, you need shareholders.
But does my product need to work before the shareholders come in or before people buy it? Does my product need to work? That's what I want to know.
Again, I think you're really focused in on the consumer market. I don't think you're looking at corporations as a whole. Corporations are much larger than just going to the store and buying something. I think that we need to look at it holistically, and holistically, you need shareholders to operate a corporation.
Few minutes on the clock. Opponent? Ready? Judge? Okay. Starting the clock now. So thank you for the wonderful speech. I have a few things to say concerning his initial speech. He mentioned the issue of moral obligation and saying that there's an incentive to make profit. Just take note, I did not say there was not an incentive to make profit. The focus of what? You owe more to your consumers. Owe more to your consumers. You can be making profit and still owe more to your consumers. Apple is making profit. Amazon is making profit. But who do they owe more to? The focus is, who do you owe more to? We are not saying you're making a loss. Who do you owe more to? The consumers. The focus is the consumers. We are not saying don't make profit. Who do you owe more to? The foundation is the consumers. We also mentioned about some companies, such as some LLC companies, which are great, or wealth building companies, which don't necessarily have fiscal products. All that I agree. But take note that before any great investor, let's say Warren Buffett, maybe someone begins to manage Warren Buffett's wealth, Warren Buffett has to avail his wealth to you. You can't be managing an empty space and say you're managing wealth. No, someone has to actually sign documents and avail the wealth to you. That, take charge of this, make it grow. If no one comes, how then do you say you're managing wealth? What are you managing? An empty room? Of course not. Someone has to bring it to you. Hence, that person becomes a consumer because they are there for a service, not necessarily a product or a good. Also mentioned the issue that some corporations are created by individuals and such as stockholders or shareholders. If, let's say, a group of stockholders say, we're going to create a corporation in which that corporation is going to focus on investment in companies or managing wealth. Let's take note that these shareholders who have created the company now have a dicey position. They become both the consumers and the shareholders. In the fact that they are investing in the company, but what do they expect? That what they are investing in should grow, that it should actually work. So to whoever is managing the company, the CEO now may be the head, but your consumers are the shareholders. Because they're expecting things to work. They brought something to you, maybe a service of wealth to you, and they're expecting it to work. You owe them a moral obligation to make sure that works. Even though it may be $100 billion and not necessarily be a fiscal product, but you owe it to the people who have brought it to you to make sure that it works. Also, one person also talked about the fact that the entity, hold on. He said it's not a moral statement, it's a fact. Take note, it's a fact that your product has to work. And thank you, dear Open, for making such a statement. It's a fact your product has to work for people to purchase it. For you to become a corporation, your product has to work. For a shareholder like me to come and say, I'm going to buy Apple stock or Nvidia stock, the product has to work. Nvidia has to grow. People need to be in the business. Also mention the fact that the shareholders of, let's say, Oreo can take their money out and Oreo goes away. No, Oreo doesn't go away. Why? Because the consumer, someone like me, will go out to the store and buy Oreo. Thank you very much.
All right, I have 5 minutes. Judge ready? Opponent?
Yeah.
All right, and we'll begin now. Judge, this being my last time speaking, I want to thank you again. Thank you for my opponent. This is a wonderful round. Really do appreciate talking about this. However, I do think we've gotten lost in the weeds here. Again, this is kind of thanks to the notion of being kind of fuzzy. Oh, more. What does that exactly mean, Judge? If you don't know by now, the opponent has failed with his burden of proof. The affirmation has a burden of proof to say what this means. What I'm getting from him is to say is that products have to work. When products work, consumers buy. Therefore, corporations owe all of their gratitude and all of their moral obligation to the consumer. And Judge, I can tell you that this is not the case. We do not have a moral obligation to make someone feel good in the context of a corporation. The corporation has an obligation to the shareholders. My opponent even said this. I do want to go down the flow here so you don't get lost, but I do want to say this. He said, well, if Warren Buffett just gave you a bunch of money, then you want it to grow. Then you can't just like manage empty space, basically. But this is the important part. He got a ground floor. Warren Buffett, the shareholder, had to give you money in order to start this profit. So do you have more obligation to the shareholder, Warren Buffett in this case, or the consumer that will ultimately buy the product? And Judge, what I can tell you here is this is why people looking at Shark Tank, you say, I'm going to give you $3 million with 5% equity. What does that mean, Judge? You have an obligation to please the shareholder. Why? Because he's giving you $300, $400, however much, thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars, to do what? To build your company. And Judge, I agree. Like, I'm not going to negate that the companies cannot be made from consumers. I think that's absolutely true. However, my opponent disregards two things. One, some corporations have no consumers. I brought you that. He didn't refute that. So the fact that there are corporations without consumers can show that corporations can live without consumers and it can just be shareholders. However, you can't have the inverse. You cannot have a corporation with no shareholders and just a bunch of consumers. You can't do it. So the order of operation here is to make sure the shareholders are happy so that the company can keep going and that the consumers can buy into that product. That's the structure. That's the obligations, if you want to call it that. But ultimately, it is no moral obligation. This is a fact resolution. We are not talking about anything moral in this case. This is a man-made document, and we signed off of it, and that's simply what it is. So there's nothing more than that. So let's just go right down this flow. I know it's a little messy, so I apologize. But I'm going to defend my case here. My opponent didn't actually touch on any of my contention, so I think that's very important in today's round, which means that it flows straight to the affirmation. However, he did touch on 3 of my observations, so I'm going to talk about that. He talked about the moral, and he said, owe more to who? The consumers, the focus. And again, I think my opponent is rewording the resolution here because owe more was never defined in his top speech. We don't know what that means. All he told you is that it was a moral obligation. That's all he said, which I don't agree with that, and I don't think you would either. And to be completely honest, owe more doesn't have any moral affiliation at all. Owe is to be obligatory, to oblige. That's what owe means. I looked it up prior to round. And who do we have an obligation to please? The people who initially started that corporation going, which in the case that my opponent provided would be Warren Buffett, giving you that wealth. That's the obligation. The consumer goes into the store and buys the thing. That's all they do. The stakeholder, the shareholder, is risking millions of dollars to make sure the company grows. That's an obligation. Owe more. We owe more to the people that contribute millions and hundreds of millions of dollars just because it's a man-made construct. This isn't talking about any morality at all. So don't confuse this with morality at all. We're talking about a man-made business, making sure that the stakeholders are happy so that the consumers can continue to have these products. That's what we're talking about here. The second is going to be talking about how there's certain corporations that don't have consumers, and my opponent said someone has to give the wealth. Again, this is a wonderful flow to the negation, because if someone has to give the wealth in order for the consumer to get the product, and like at the end of this process, you got to have Warren Buffett. You got to have a shareholder. So who's that? Shareholders at the very beginning. You have the idea, you have the shareholder, and then it's to the consumer. So ultimately, we owe this shareholder millions of dollars. And thank you for doing it. I really appreciate that. He skipped my third and fourth observation, but he touched on my fifth, which was fifth was going to be not a moral statement of fact. He said fact. Product has to work. I agree the product should work and ought to work if the consumer is going to buy it. But that doesn't negate that if the product doesn't work, the stakeholder is never going to give money to it, right? So ultimately, the stakeholder is going to be the one affiliating and putting out that money. Again, he didn't respond to any of my reputations on his case, so that's all that he said. So I'm just going to get into some voters. The first voter I'm going to say is going to be fact resolution. This is a fact resolution. Do not misconstrue with a moral obligation or anything like that. I don't think Bill Gates has a moral obligation to make me feel happy. I think that he has an incentive to make me feel happy because he can get $500, $600 out of me. But ultimately, he has to keep the Microsoft shareholders more happy than me because ultimately they're going to share their stock and be rich. But keeping me happy is not going to destroy the business. Keeping the shareholders happy will destroy the business. And that's going to be the second, is that you can have one but not the other. You need to have shareholders, but if you don't have consumers, not a big deal, but you gotta have shareholders to have a corporation. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Good. Opponent, ready?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opponent. That is the last time you hear me speaking. And I have to start by saying morality does not equal to happiness. Doing what is moral doesn't necessarily mean it will lead to happiness. What my opponent is trying to say is that because they owe them morality, they should make the consumer happy. No. Let's not confuse the two. It's their obligation. They owe more to me to give me a good product. A good product to make me satisfied, but not necessarily happy. I may be satisfied with this timer I'm getting. It's working well. I'm satisfied with it. But my happiness has nothing to do with this timer. And it's not the duty of corporations to make me happy. It's not the duty of Apple or any corporation to make the consumers or shareholders happy. No, you have to satisfy their interests, not necessarily make them happy. Satisfy their demands. My opponent talks about the fact that he makes mention of the fact that Warren Buffett giving you his wealth to grow. Me giving you wealth to grow does not make me a shareholder. No, you have a business. Let's say you have an LLC, whatever name it is, Apex LLC, and I'm saying, okay, I have $100 million. Grow this for me. I'm a consumer at that moment, because I'm not investing in your company to hold shares, because when they're having a shareholders meeting, you won't call me. Even though I've given $100 million, which is a lot of money, but you won't call me as a shareholder. Why? Because I'm not a shareholder. I have given you money to manage. Buffett has given money to manage. That doesn't make you a shareholder of your company. Also made mention of the fact that the moral obligation is to those who start a company. And he's right. The moral obligation is to those who started a company. Let's take note that the product has to work. What my opponent is trying to say that corporations exist because people are investing in them. Corporations exist because their product works and investors exist to bring the money in them. First and foremost, the product is working. What about corporation you think there is? Basically, they're selling a product. Let's say Nestle, they're selling milk. The milk is sweet, it's affordable, people like it. Hence, people come and invest in it. If people are not buying the milk, who's going to invest in a company that's failing for 20 years? No one. No significant wise shareholder will invest in such a company. My opponent also made the fact that this is a fact resolution, and it's true. It's a fact resolution with regards to the fact that you owe more to them. And the owing more to them is a moral obligation. It's a fact that it's a moral obligation. My opponent mentioned the fact that I didn't touch on a couple of statements or a couple of points he made concerning my resolution, concerning his rebuttals he made to my case. And for that, what I would say was that what I said was that businesses are built for what? Products to work. Remember during my speech, in my initial speech, I made a statement that they are not built just for profit, but for what? The business itself to work, for the product itself to work. Then what? Investors come into play. At this moment, Judge, I would like to give my voters. My first voter is no consumer, no corporation. That is, without any consumer, there's no corporation. And my second voter is shareholders exist because the businesses are working, consumers are buying the product. With this, I'll be the ones who do take all the app. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You do handshakes? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Do you do handshakes?
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Nice
Thank you.
job.